Masterclass Reel. I would request Professor and Dr. Milind, Pro-Chancellor Operations at the NorthCap University, to carry out the proceedings of the session. Sir?
Thank you, Professor Divyabha, and good morning to all of you. And welcome back to the NorthCap Masterclass, the series of talks designed to enlighten you with insights and perspectives from different speakers, thinkers, scholars, and industry leaders. As you are all aware, the NorthCap University for 25 years has been a leader in the field of education, producing more than 11,000 alumni now who are working in good positions in multinationals all over the world. We provide excellence in engineering, management, and law today, and our collaboration that we recently announced with Arizona State University will open even more doors and windows for students of tomorrow. Now, in terms of introducing today's speaker, Mr. Shree Parthasarathy is currently a partner at Thornton, the global consulting multinational firm. Prior to becoming a partner, he was a managing director, consulting technology and transformation at Deloitte for nearly 18 years. He is an expert and provides strategies and solutions in the areas of enterprise asset management, business process optimization and re-engineering, infrastructure design and integration of emerging technologies. All look very complicated, and they are indeed complicated, but in the hands of Shree, they become very easy. Shree has extensive experience in enterprise cybersecurity across cloud and non-cloud infrastructure, social media platforms, governance, risk and compliance, and cyber managed services. Aside from being an author and renowned TED speaker, he is fluent in English, Hindi, Tamil, Kannada, Punjabi, and Spanish, a polyglot indeed. And as you will find, he is a very engaging speaker. Let me invite Mr. Shree Parthasarathy to speak to you. Towards the end of his speech, the chat box will be open, and you may type your questions for him, if any, and Professor Divyabha will moderate the questions for you. Welcome, Shree, and over to you.
Thank you, Milind. It's always a pleasure to be here with NCU and to essentially speak to the young minds today. And if I'm going to basically share a brief presentation, which I will just use for a guide and which essentially will be shared with all of you if you so desire. Just give me a second. I'd like to say a very big thank you, and it's a pleasure and honor here for me to be here with the entire faculty of NorthCap University. It's a pleasure to not only be here from a perspective of where we are partnering on many different areas, and I think it's as we sort of engage further, I think it's going to become a mutually enriching experience, which essentially we plan to jointly provide to all of you young minds as we move forward, and which is where, as Professor Melinda rightfully said, it's the question of how do we bring some of these particular capabilities to your particular doorstep, and how can industry and academia actually participate and do things together for you. I still remember those particular days when I was essentially a young student, eagerly looking up to people and thinking about what I wanted to do. And I think always there is a question and a challenge as from an industry perspective as to what are those particular opportunities, how should I navigate, because essentially when I look at the undergraduation that you're doing or graduation that you're doing, that's just a stepping stone into your entire life, which essentially will take you further and into greater height. And it is in your professors, teachers, and academicians that you are putting that particular trust that they will essentially guide and mentor you through this particular journey. But one thing that I would tell you is you can take away as much as you want from your professors, teachers, and other people who you will interact throughout your journey in the campus. the question of how much you want to take away, and I think that is very important. And why am I saying that? Because there are so many different vast resources, and each one of your professors, each one of your teachers are a wealth of knowledge, are a wealth of experience. How do you basically tap into that particular wealth of knowledge and experience, and how do you take away what it is? Just attending class is just one basic aspect which you would basically do, but then essentially, how do you really tap into their particular network, their knowledge, and how do you really go away being very enriched? And also, post that, how do you contribute back to NCU? How do you contribute back in terms of what I call it as paid forward, in terms of paid forward to the future students who are going to come into NCU? I think that is going to be very important. Myself, I'm a national managing partner of Trust and Transformation and Grand Thornton. As you see the logo on the right, GT Bharat. We are here essentially working very closely to create a vibrant Bharat. And a vibrant Bharat will not be a vibrant Bharat without all of you. You are the vibrant Bharat. You are the future, and it is important for us to basically share knowledge, share information, and guide and coach you so that we shape you into what we call as the future netizen, future citizen, and the future leaders in industry who essentially can take Bharat forward. And this particular program of what we are doing with NCU is very aligned with that in terms of how do we do a lot more of Make in India, how do we do a lot more with what the Honorable Prime Minister talks about from an overall growth story for India and for Bharat. So, which is where I think I will move on to the next slide here. My journey itself essentially started uh, in Bangalore. That is where I started my journey. And like most of you from different cities, different metropolitan cities, essentially, or in terms of even rural or urban, I think I started uh, in a my journey from a perspective of getting into computer science. For me, the journey was much easier because I had my siblings who essentially were in the area of computer science, and essentially engineering was a natural choice for me. But for many of you, as you possibly look, you may not have that particular experience or that particular liberty of tapping into some of your own family. In that case, I think the journey becomes a little more sort of uh, I made this particular choice. Where am I going with this? Where will it actually lead me? Do I really have I really made a choice? And I'm sure many of you are asking that particular question, right? And I think so did I, when even though I had a lot of people to guide and mentor me and other things. And I think even at that point, computer science, which I basically took up, was very, very new. So everybody used to go for electronics and communication or mechanical engineering or some of those particular areas from that aspect. And so when you take the field of engineering, irrespective of what you do, it provides you a wealth of knowledge which you possibly get. And that is the base foundation for anything that you can build on top of that. Whether you do a engineering today, whether you do a MCA today, do a Bachelor of Science, irrespective of what you do, on top of that, you build further foundations, and then you actually create your journey, you create your experience, which essentially will take you further. Post that, I did my studies in the University of Mysore, and that is where I basically went in. And like each one of you, I was in a campus where there used to be a lot of speakers, a lot of people who came in. But again, essentially, the thirst of knowledge is what essentially drove me into a lot of areas within my campus in terms of what I did. And I think it's important for all of you to think about academics is one part, the network of students, the network of people that you will build is the second aspect that I would ask you to take away, which is going to be very important because each one of these people, once they leave, are going to fly away into different directions and essentially are going to do and follow their own journey. But how do you maintain that particular network and how do you strengthen that on a continuous basis? When I talk of network, it's not just your classmates, it's essentially the entire school of engineering or law, wherever you are, right? To the entire school that essentially you think about, and how do you build that particular network within NCU, which essentially is going to be a very strong foundation. And also, how do you build that particular strong connect and network with your teachers, professors who are there, and essentially sort of leverage that. Second part is the network. The third part is what do you do outside of your regular academics? Yes, it's important to get grades. It is important to get a lot of things from a perspective of, yeah, I got a A plus, I got a A, but then essentially, how does that translate into industry? How does that translate? So the question is, throughout that particular aspect, how do you complement your learning? If you just learn from the book and go away, then that is going to be very theoretical knowledge. How do you practically apply that particular knowledge? And I think that is where the question is going to be about internship and what you basically do there. Those internships are going to be very enriching for you. And the internships are very, very key because they will also give you an aspect of what is the choice of career that you want to make. Like how you're confused, maybe confused today. Some of you may not be confused. Some of you may be absolutely clear that this is what I want to do. Perfect. That's fantastic. But for those of you who are not, then essentially the question is, how do you basically make that particular choice, even in terms of your career? Because as you come to your third year or your fourth year, you're starting to think, hey, do I need to go into consulting? Do I need to go into industry? Do I need to go into government? Do I need to fly abroad to do my master? All of these particular questions are going to continue to pop into your head, but it's a question of how do you basically plan that particular journey. It's not that magically those things are going to come at you at some point in time. They are essentially out there. You just need to plan so that you do it in the right way. So which is where I would say carefully pick and choose your internship, which essentially will also help you in your journey. And throughout my particular engineering, I did about 4 or 5 different internships, which essentially eventually helped me in term. I did internship in software development. I did internship in sales. I did an internship with industry to basically look at the areas related to analytics. Those areas it was called BI, business analytics. Then I did some amount of work in programming. So a whole range of different internships that I did so that I could actually make the right choice in terms of as I was moving through that. And post that, essentially, I worked for UV Information and then went off to the US, and which is where I essentially spent a lot of time, 15 years. And even today, a lot of people ask me, as to Sri, you spent 15 years there, so why did you come back? I think what really brought me back is essentially how do I basically give back to the country? How do I essentially sort of do what I really needed to do? I think very passionate in terms of giving back to society, and which is why I'm here in terms of talking to each one of you and saying how I can actually share my experience and how my experience and some of those particular things can possibly help you take it forward. Throughout all of this, a segment that I did not talk about is your parents. I think they have a lot of hope. And as they look at you, they are really looking for you to essentially be the future leaders and they are aspiring. So I think it's important for all of you, whenever you look at it, right? You have your guru, you have your parents, you have yourself. How do you continue to basically nurture that particular relationship? It's a triangular relationship, but I think these are the people who shape you in the future. So I think continue to basically maintain that particular relationship. And I will tell you that it's a very enriching relationship as you move forward. So, what is life all about? I think all of you would possibly say life is about essentially, I think if I were to ask you how many of you would like to get a large paycheck out of once you're out of university, I'm sure ideally I would have conducted this particular session in a setting where I can be there, seeing you, looking into your eyes and asking you this question. But essentially here I will basically ask the question, what is life all about? It is not just about making that money. Money is important, right? I think everybody would basically say that, Sri, you're at a particular stage, I think, where possibly my money may not be important, but we have a life ahead, we need money. I agree that money is important, but I think the choice of career is very, very important. choice of what you do is going to be very important. And that is something that you have to choose carefully. Today, when I roll out of bed, I think about work and I basically look at what I do. I run the business, and that is what I like to do. And whatever I have done in my life, I've actually tried to enjoy it and do it. And it is going to be important for each one of you to choose and pick up those particular careers, which essentially will make you happy day after day. Because when you go to work, whether it is your own business or whether it is something you're working for somebody, doesn't matter. But when you go into work, you need to be able to give your 200%. When you give your 200%, then essentially what is going to happen is it's going to be a whole different ball game for you. Then you are going to excel in what you do. You're going to have a free flight. It's something like a bird, right? If you look at a bird and look at it flying, you look at it, you think that it's actually floating in the sky. It's actually enjoying itself, and that's what it's doing. And it's looking down. It's basically floating around and all things, which is exactly the way you possibly need to do. Your beginning life is going to be where, if I were to take a game of cricket, where you're starting with the stroke with in terms of hitting the ball. Many of you play cricket. Some of you don't play cricket. That's fine. But cricket is the national sport. So, and then as you get used to the particular pitch, the ball, and as you get familiar with the particular environment, you start hitting those boundaries and all of those particular things that you do. And essentially, that's exactly what you will need to do at work, which is why essentially all the things that you gain at NorthCap and all the things that you gain from your professors, all the things that you gain from your internship, and also keep one other thing in mind. There are a lot of co-curricular activities and other things like the clubs and other things which you should participate, because those are also going to add a very different dimension. And why do I say that? Most professions today require you to be a communicator. Most professions expect you to be vocal about how you speak, how you express yourself. And those are things that are not going to be taught to you from the book. What you learn from the book, if you cannot basically practically apply it in real life and communicate what you want to say to people, then I think that is going to be a mismatch. So, which is where the co-curricular activities also are going to be good, very important. And then as you apply each one of these within your life and as you move forward, you will have your calling. You will decide what you really want to do, and that essentially is going to take you through the particular journey, which is going to be enriching, and that is going to be very important. Yes. Take a look at, all of you are at what you call at a particular stage of an era which is extremely disruptive. You have disruption from technology, you have disruption in terms of operating models, you have disruption in terms of public policy. And when I say disruption in terms of individuals, I'll explain that. Technology, I will dive deeper into this. I think all of you possibly understand that there's an exponential explosion of technology that is coming out at you. And in this particular world, futuristic, irrespective of what degree you take, irrespective of what technology is going to be a common denominator. Technology, digital, all of those are going to be common denominators. Gone are the days when essentially you can say, hey, I'm going to focus on this, but I don't really need to focus on technology. Technology is going to be very important for each one of you to look at. And the rate at which technology is getting disrupted, many of you possibly remember Moore's Law, which essentially was set at a particular point in time. But then when you really look at today and where what Moore's law said and what technology is today, it's very, very different. If you take this classic iPhone, right? This iPhone and what power it basically packs would have essentially been 5 stories or five floors of building, and that is the kind of computing technology that would have been needed to essentially provide you the power of this particular iPhone, right? And it doesn't mean it's not just the iPhone; it can be the Android, it can be any of the smartphones. All of them have power, so much power, computing power packed into that. And if you look at it, by 2025, we expect that essentially the world will be able to map the brain of a human being, and which is when true artificial intelligence will actually come into to the forefront, and which is right now what you look at AI, I think it's going through an ascendancy, but as you look at future, that is where you're looking at technology, and that is what is going to be a big game changer. And that is the era that you're going into. And think of it this way, you are in 2021 today, but you are going into workforce in 2025. As you come into university, disruptions are happening in parallel. If you do not keep abreast of these particular disruptions, what is really going to happen is you will learn something which is static at a point in time, which cannot be applied because the world has shifted below you. So which is why you need to keep current with what are the happenings, and depending on the industry or where you want to go, keep very, very current in terms of what you basically do. Individuals, the worker itself is changing. All of you are possibly aware that it is not just employees, it's employees, you have contractors, you have freelance workers, and I'll talk a lot more about that. All those things are changing. Now, how does that basically matter to you? I have a future slide which will talk a little more. Then let's talk about operating models. If you take 2019, Uber was on a rise. Uber was significantly on an explosive path. And essentially, it was predicted that every one of us would sort of be in a particular situation that we would not need to have cars. We would all be using shared infrastructure, and that is what we would do. We would rent a car, we would move. And the convenience of that continues to be there. But however, I think what this really disrupted everything. What disrupted everything was COVID, pandemic. So the operating model shifted, or the consumer behavior shifted. The consumer all of a sudden started looking at, hey, if somebody else has used the Uber, unless it is sanitized, I would not want to go and sit in that particular car. So the entire model of shared concept and other thing basically changed, and which is where the operating, and now the organization has to change its operating model. But just think about, go back a little bit. Prior to Uber, prior to Ola and others, what would you do? Traditionally, you would call you would possibly try to get an auto, or you would try to get a public transportation, or you would basically try to call a cab company, and that is what you do. In came Uber and Ola and all of the online operators, which essentially disrupted that entire model. Are they going to be disrupted in the future? Absolutely. If they don't continue to be innovative, and if they don't continue to do things, they will essentially be disrupted too. And so are some of the very large organizations like Kodak, Xerox, and others, which were essentially leading edge organizations of their time. But today, when you look at them, where are they? And the jobs that you will, the organization that you will see in the future have not yet been created. They are organizations which essentially will come further into this particular space to further disrupt. 20 years ago, there was no Google, right? Today, you see Google, you see Apple, you see all the large companies which are actually disrupting Facebook and others. They are disrupting things. So, how do you really look at that? The operating models have changed. So, as consumer behavior, consumer consumption, everything has changed. Public policy and government continues to basically regulate. We talk about cryptocurrency, but essentially the regulators are still not ready in terms of what they want to do. And so essentially, as public policy changes, so when you look at it, all these are external forces that are pressuring you to change, and which is going to be very important for each one of you to think about. And feel free to keep posting your questions. I will basically leave enough time at the end for answering these particular questions. I'm going to go a little faster going into the few slides. Now, talk about the 7 big disruptors that are going to disrupt your life. Uh, when you look at it, it is like you're here to possibly hear what is that particular world, fantastic jobs, and all of those particular things. I'm here to basically sort of come in and show you that these are some of the things, changes that you need to adapt to. These are some of the things that you have to look at from a futuristic perspective, which will essentially get you prepared for that particular disruptive future. And remember one thing, there's only Change is the only constant. Life will continue to change. Operating models will change. Technologies will change. The way you work will change. The way you commute to work will change. In some cases, you may not even commute to work, right? All of that will basically change. And all of these are big disruptors in terms of your particular work environment or the future of business that you will get into. As I said, technology is everywhere. For many of us who essentially have been in eras when essentially we had to use a landline or there was no landline, and then essentially there were no mobile technology. I think all of us are adapted over a period of time. And if you go and sit down with one of your senior professors and talk to them, they will possibly describe to you what they used to do at that point in time. How many of you have even seen a rotary phone? How many of you have even seen a typewriter, right? So, and or even a modem or a fax machine. Many of you may have not seen that. That's because it's not anything about uh, that you've not seen it and you should feel uh, that's an issue. It's not. Technology continues to change. If somebody asks me if I've seen a mechanical loom, maybe I've not, right? Because those were, and as you take the industrial ages and as things have changed, a lot of things have changed over a period of time. And today, when you look at it, I think technology is everywhere. Technology is disrupting the way we are engaging today. Technology is disrupting the way you are taught. Technology is way how you interact with your campus. Technology is the way how you're ordering food. Technology is the way which is disrupting almost everything that you're looking from your life perspective. And when you think of technology is everywhere, then it is that much more important that you look at technology very, very carefully. Spend time in terms of taking some of those particular technology courses, even though you may not want to specialize in technology, that's not a problem. But take those particular technology courses which are going to be very important. Tsunami of data. I know all of you possibly access WhatsApp, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, and name it. I possibly have all those apps. Telegram, I can basically keep reeling off, right? And then you have website, you have your campus information that's being provided. Like you are being constantly bombarded with data. The tsunami of data that is going to come at you is going to be significant. But the message here is not important from that aspect. You are the future business leaders and you are the people who are essentially going to take the world forward, which means as a business leader, you will need to grapple with a lot of data that comes at you. And you will need to basically be thinking about how that particular data is going to affect your organization, how that data is going to affect your decision making, how that data is going to affect your operating model, how it's going to. Today, if I take one ball and throw it at you, you'll catch it. If I told two, you'll still try to catch it. Three, you'll still catch it. But then when I start throwing multiple, you'll basically give up. Why is that? Because that's all that you could basically do. Similarly, when data comes at you, today what you're grappling with is data, which essentially is a lot of digital data coming from a lot of these social media. When you're in an organization, data is going to flow to you from different aspects. And what would you need to do? You need to be able to analyze this data, break it down, get it down to useful chunks of information. Trust me, 80% of what comes will be garbage. How do you check it out? 20% is what you keep. So the aspect of data science and analytics is continuing to basically ascend. Data science and analytics essentially is a particular area. Whether you take retail, whether you take banking, whether you take pharmaceuticals, whether you take manufacturing, whether you take government, everywhere essentially data is the new oil and data is going to be very important. So data science, data analytics, and those particular areas are going to be significant. Similar, while I talked about technology again, people who want to be big technologists, there are things like networks, technology, enterprise technology, IoT. There are a whole range of the technologies that are continuing to basically disrupt. How do you basically specialize in that? Now let's come to AI, cognitive computing, and robotics. I think when we talk of AI, even today, AI has been talked for. When I was in engineering, I think the big thing was AI, artificial intelligence. Even today, when you come in, people are talking about AI, ML. But I think it still has a long way to go from a AI and a AI artificial intelligence perspective. I think, as I said, 2025, when we are able to map the human brain, and when we are able to get that into computing, I think that is when AI will possibly take the next level. I'm sure there are going to be enough thought leaders out there who are possibly not going to agree with me, but I have my views in terms of what AI is basically doing today. But AI essentially, if you look at your journey, AI is going to become a significant component of what you do. Cognitive computing, robotics, all of these. Robotics has already essentially gained significant ascendancy. It's gone to the next generation. So robotics is already there. Cognitive computing in terms of how you interface the whole range of AR, VR, and how do you basically sort of move from technology, digital, phygital, all of those particular terminology. Phygital is about integration between the physical world and the digital world. How do you basically do that? All of those essentially are gaining. And so if you were to look at futuristic AI, computing, robotics, blockchain, a lot of those particular new age technology, all of those are gaining ascendancy as you basically look at. Okay. So the top line was fantastic, right? Technology is everywhere, tsunami of data, AI, cognitive computing, and robotics, and all of you will be very happy where you are in terms of the kind of courses that you can take, which is fantastic. Now let's come to the uh, next set. Jobs are vulnerable to automation. Look at your coworker in 2025. And it is not even 2025. Even today, there are some restaurants which are replacing their waiters with robots. Futuristic, when you are going to basically be competing for a job, look at the four people sitting on that. One is a robot, right? The other one could also be a robot. It could be an android, right? It's a question of how it will basically. The only thing is, and now what you're going to do is you're going to compete with them. Are you going to compete with them? If you compete with them, you will lose. You have to move on. You have to figure out how you basically move on to other jobs, which essentially cannot be done by the robot, which cannot be done. So, which is where I would talk to you here futuristic. What is going to be the most important aspect, which will be paid a premium, is human interaction and the human touch. Today, if you call a credit card company, you get a call center, which essentially takes you to voicemail, and all you're trying to do is which number should I press, right? Which number should I press to get that operator? Because this particular system is junk. It is not giving me the solution, and you want to really press that button. You're trying one, you're trying two, you're trying nine, you're trying pound until you basically get the operator. That essentially is going to be the change that you will see in your particular generation, the aspect of human touch and what really needs to be done there. And I think the jobs will also shift. You will need to adapt, rapid adaptation, that is going to be important. Diversity and generational change. What does that mean? Today, what we are seeing, and I think it's fantastic to see a lot more of integrated workforce where we are having a lot more of diversity, a lot more women coming into the workforce, and it's not just diversity from a women perspective, diversity from language, diversity from culture, diversity from international borders, how people are all coming together to actually work. And the more you start thinking about a fluid workspace, the more you start thinking about a digital workspace, diversity and generational change will continue to basically impact you. So the question of how do you interact with this kind of diversity and how do you really manage that? Your thought process, let's say you came from Delhi, and your thought process may be very different from a person who comes from somebody somewhere in New York, and both of you may have thoughts, but it may be very diverging thoughts. How do you learn to appreciate the other person's thought? How do you basically manage in that in the workforce? Next is careers or 100-year life. In our generation, essentially, people say people retire at 60, 65, 70, and what we believe in your generation, people will most likely what you call retire at 70, 75, because that's how long life is going to be. Things are going to possibly change. But when I talk of retirement, I know most of you are thinking that I'm just starting my career, and Sri is already talking about retirement. When I talk of retirement, I'm just talking about financial independence. I would really ask each one of you to think about that by the time you're in your late 30s, 30 to 40, try to become very financially independent. If you can do that, then rest of your journey beyond that will essentially be very, very different. Is it possible? It is absolutely possible. But the question is, how do you basically engage? How do you basically do that? And futuristic, when you look at it, retirement is just a particular age. And that is essentially moving away from the workforce. Because if you are independent, then you can possibly have a choice of whatever you want to do and possibly enjoy life a little differently compared to others. And if you're passionate about building businesses, if you're passionate about doing things, you this gives you a choice. So think about it as a 100-year life, which is going to be very important. This essentially will also change a lot of things, right? It changed Medicare, it changes insurance, it changes all the different business segments. It basically completely changes that. Explosion and contingent work. Just like how you had vulnerability to automation, similarly, in your particular environment, you are going to have explosion and contingent work. Previously, let's say I was in Gurgaon, I was only competing with the people who can physically be in Gurgaon. Now you're basically competing with people who are in Gurgaon, people who are in Timbuktu, people who are in uh, Joburg, people who are in New York, people who are in Chicago. That is the kind of employee base that somebody can tap into from a workforce perspective. Then you have the whole range of contractors, freelance workers, gig workers, all of which essentially is going to disrupt the way you basically do work, and which essentially builds builds a lot more pressure in the system from a competitive landscape. But that's the way the world is basically moving. Let me quickly run through these. We are at 10:38, so I still need to give you time for your questions. This essentially is talking about consumer tech adoption. Uh, Look at the global IP traffic, which is estimated by 2023. And when I wrote this presentation, it was 4 zettabytes. Now, based on latest, it is almost like close to 7 zettabytes. And I would encourage all of you to go and take a look at what's a zettabyte. That will sort of give you the kind of enormity of data, IP traffic, and the enormity of data that is going to basically flow through the internet, right? And I know each one of you has possibly multiple devices, and I think that the nature, that the changing game that is there. And then when we start thinking about not just the devices that we interact, like the computer and the tablet, but now essentially every device is becoming smart, right? Your fridge is becoming smart, your home is becoming smart, your washing machine is becoming smart, your car has already become smart. So how do you basically look at all of that? And every one of them is sort of dealing with data. And how do you deal with that? Whether it is from a perspective of new technologies, creating new solutions, or from a cybersecurity, or from a perspective of privacy, how do you really manage all of these particular aspects in terms of whether it's operating model transformation? How do you basically create these particular entire solutions for organization? Look at the from 1970 to 2010. If you look at 1970, a few technologies, then 1980, 2010, and then 2020 to 2025, there's a whole range of exponential. And these are the exponentials. Artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, blockchain and distributed ledger, 3D printing, drones, electric and connected cars, nanotechnology, mobile payment, wearables, geoengineering, genomics, robotics and machine intelligence. This is what I meant that when I talked about data, I talked about the ball. The same thing is happening to you from a technology perspective. So the question that you have thinking is, hey, do I specialize in Internet of Things? Do I specialize in robotics? Do I specialize in 3D printing, nanotechnology? What do I do? What do I really need to do? And which is where I think I would ask you to possibly think through your particular journey and plan it out in such a way, and which is where your internships and the experience that you gain throughout your particular courses are going to be very important. What is changing things? Changing consumer demand, disruptive technologies, dynamic competitive landscape, and the pandemic. All of us know that COVID has disrupted us forever. The way we work, everything has basically changed, right? So let's go into rapid change and adaptation. If you take away one thing from your school or university, it would be about rapid change and adaptation, which is going to be important. As I said, change is the only constant. Technologies change, jobs change, your role will change, how you operate will change. So you need to get into that particular environment where you basically start thinking about how do I adapt on a very fast basis? How do I essentially take this particular journey forward? And I would not want you to feel like an ostrich where it says that, hey, the storm is coming, so let me bury my head in the sand and hope the storm will go away. Storm will not go away. Change will happen. So you have to learn to adapt. So that is going to be very important in terms of what you do. Future of the workforce. Three dimensions. Who is the workforce? Which is where we talked about the robot, we talked about the entire aspect of the augmented workforce, we talked about a lot more jobs getting automated, a lot more things are essentially getting to a particular level of how you do it. So, who is the workforce that is going to be working? First element would have been what is work, what is the kind of work that you would do, and all of that. The second was the workforce itself. What would you basically, who would be the people performing that work? Third is essentially the workplace. I know when I started my career, it was essentially, hey, I need to go into that particular office building, fantastic plush building. I'm going to basically be working there, and I'm going to be interacting with a lot of people, a lot of facilities, a lot of things. I've worked through fantastic workplaces throughout my journey where a lot of things were provided. But in your particular case, I think all of that may change. It may be a lot more of a hybrid kind of a model where you may be working a lot more from home, and that may be the nature of the beast. So, how do you basically adapt to that? Which means essentially your work environment at home or work environment wherever you choose to work from essentially has to be very, very different in terms of structure. So, organizations are grappling with that in terms of the workplace, and the entire for them it becomes a lot more flexibility in terms of real estate. They don't need to hold that much of real estate, and now they have access to people across the country or across the world who can basically do the work, and with the kind of digital technology, work can seamlessly flow to anybody. But there are some particular work which have to be done in a physical this one. Like for example, if you take the hospital, the nurses and all things, they have to do the work. So similarly, there are going to be a lot of that kind of work which have to be done that way too. So it's never going to be completely remote. In some cases, it will be completely remote, but most cases it will be a combination of hybrid. Augmented workforce, as I said before, employee, joint ventures, contractors, freelancers, crowdsourcing, robots. That's your competition. Yeah, or essentially, you could be one of the, in and choose to basically see how you're going to work in the future. Or you could be essentially the employer who essentially creates a startup and you're basically employing all of these people. What work can be done by smart machines? Take a look. Digital, physical, and RPA, cognitive, AI, analytics, digital platform, digital reality, devices and sensors, and the whole range of technologies on the right. All of these essentially system of systems, Internet of Things, smart cities, smart workplaces, all of these essentially are getting automated. But you have to get into a particular mode where you understand these technologies, understand the use cases, understand the model, and you have to get into a particular stage where you guys will essentially be the people who are going to be coding or people who are going to create the future technologies or going to be integrating the future technologies or applying it to basically transform the business world. We already spoke about this. This is the traditional perimeter. This is the virtual enterprise, right? A lot of us would be a lot more comfortable with the traditional perimeter, but unfortunately, the world has moved and we cannot rewind the clock. We are in the virtual enterprise, and that is where it is. Unless you basically choose to basically go live in a small hut in the Himalayas or whatever it is, or some place where you have your own, you're financially independent, in which particular case, I don't think you would have been here attending this particular course. Yeah. And essentially, so to figure out what you want to really do, it's the choice that you basically make, traditional perimeter versus virtual enterprise. With where can work be done? Co-located, physical proximity, distributed. All of these are models that I've already talked about briefly. Yeah. Once again, Grant Thornton, a global organization, 135 plus countries, 58,000 people globally. We look forward to the opportunity of working with each one of you. And as we continue the journey, I am available to you not just today, but throughout your particular uh, your courses or through your career forward, feel free to reach out to me. I'm available on LinkedIn. I'm Shree Parthasarathy, National Managing Partner at Grant Thornton, manage trust and transformation for Grant Thornton. Thank you, and over back to you, Milind, for a question from the student.
Thank you, Shri, for an exciting talk. It almost sounds like science fiction, though it is not. It is already here. I see questions flowing in the chat box already, so I'll let Professor Divyabha pick questions in whatever sequence she wishes.
Sure.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Many questions have come. And yes, I would like to thank you first for giving these much needed inputs to our younger ones. And that choosing interest over money, that is more important now. And your session has covered many important aspects like changes and adaptation and many things. Uh, so we have invited questions also, and many questions have come up. So I'll take a question from one of the students, Divyansh. So he's talking about that in future automation and AI may kill many job roles. And do you think if there will be more unemployment in near future?
Okay. To me, when I look at it, unemployment is a state of mind. And why I say that? I think if you all when I ran through the presentation, I said change and adaptation are very important, right? How you basically adapt to rapid changes. If you expect that what you have in work today is going to be exactly what it is going to be 5 years from now, 10 years from now, or 20 years from now, then you're grossly mistaken. Then what will happen is if you have not adapted, if you have not changed, then essentially, yes, unemployment is inevitable at that point in time, right? And let me give a classic example of outsourcing. Outsourcing was a major trend which basically happened in the late 1990s and the 2020, in the 2000, right? And it continues to basically happen. It continues to disrupt businesses. There are a lot of work that was basically taken away from the US and UK and other places and brought to India and other low cost destinations. And after that, technology has changed so much and world has become flat. There are certain particular jobs which are going back. There are certain jobs which continue to basically flow here. And also there are jobs which essentially existed, which don't exist today. Uh, if you take a job of a telephone operator, which existed way back, or if you take a job of a data entry operator, a lot of these particular jobs don't exist anymore. So what you need to be thinking about is essentially how do you adapt to that particular change. If you essentially feel that the world around you is not going to shift and that whatever you learn is going to apply for the next 50 years, then you're sadly mistaken. Then essentially, I would say unemployment would be inevitable.
Thank you so much, sir.
I'm
Uh,
sure
Bharat,
he didn't want to hear this particular message, but that's the message. It's a harsh reality. That's what people need to hear. Yeah.
okay. Sir, one of the question is like, will computer science related fields be the only technical field which will have opportunities in future? If not, then what do you think other fields will grow other than CSC?
Okay. Even as I said, I think I covered it in my conversation. When you talk of 100 years of life, the world of medicine, the world of life sciences, pharma, the world of essentially the entire medical device, all of those will basically continue to be there. Healthcare will continue to basically thrive, right? Because as the population ages, those are things that are there. The world of food, retail, people have to eat. So if you go back to the fundamentals of, I think many of you understand Hindi, roti, kapda, or makan, right? Those are things that are there. And then there are a lot of other ancillary things. Like if you start focusing on the food chain and then start looking about it, there are a whole range of careers which will continue to basically thrive. And in the area of computer science, when you talk of computer science, it's the question of how do you take the knowledge of computer science and apply it to different industries. It is not about essentially every one of you have to become a computer consultant or whatever it is. But it's the question of how do you take that particular knowledge of computer science or technology and apply it to your particular field. Today, manufacturing is getting disrupted. Today, if you take retail is getting disrupted. If any of you have seen the new Amazon stores, essentially complete disruption usage of technology. And what answering the previous question, previously that particular store would have had 25 salespeople. Now essentially that particular store does not have 25 salespeople. It possibly has one store manager and rest of the people who are there, and then the rest of the people are essentially stocking it up, right? And that's what it is. So they are completely integrating it with technology. The world of banking is changing. The world of uh, the education, the way education is being provided is changing. All these particular changes are basically happening. And so, if you are in computer science and technology, I said computer science or technology is a common denominator where people need to understand. But it's a question of how you take that and apply it to almost every field and then actually make a difference. For a classic example, would you call Uber a car company or a technology company? That is what I would give you as a takeaway at this point. Next.
Yes, sir. There is a question, sir. How is brain computing beneficial in future? Isn't it an invasion of privacy?
Come again. Come again.
Yes. How is brain computing beneficial in future? Because they think that it is an invasion in privacy, invasion of privacy.
Anything that we do today is, I think, a paradox between security, privacy, and all of those particular aspects. And which is where I think if you really look at the brain and what needs to be done there, I think there are some fantastic professors that are there in your university. If I can possibly replicate their particular brains and be able to provide a lot more knowledge to other people, to the larger masses, that's going to be fantastic. Not only for them as a business model, but also to the world otherwise. It's a question of, yes, there are certain sensitive things, there are certain aspects. And uh, if you really look at it in terms of what a brain can think and all the thoughts and all things, yeah, there are certain elements that will come purely in terms of privacy, but there are also those particular things which come in the area of experience, which come in the area of knowledge and other. Take for example, Professor Millen, a wealth of knowledge. Go and talk to him at any point in time, right? And I wish essentially there were replicas of Professor Millen across every university, right? Which essentially will be such a great gift to the field of education, and that's what it is. And so, for me, when I look at it, I look at that change which is coming and I look at it in a very positive manner. Yes, there are negatives, there are aspects related to privacy, but those are things that we will have to deal with.
Thank you, sir. Though you have already covered these points, still students are asking, how do we define a digital transformation process that makes sense for us?
How do you define a digital transformation?
That makes sense for us.
Okay. I'd like to have a show of hand, uh, and I'll take the same this thing of Uber. How many of you use Uber? Let's see a show
Sir,
of hands.
yeah, students are answering your question, the earlier question also, that's a car company.
Car
And
company, okay. I don't agree with them on the car
one of the
company, but
students has
I'm
also
going to
answered
answer
that
that with
Uber is not a car company and it's a tech company. Uber has just it just connect the taxi drivers to us using their application.
perfect, perfect. So I think now look at the experience on cars and how you used to consume cars or go after a car in the previous generation or previous era, right? Let's say 15 years ago or 20 years ago, how would you order for a car? You would basically use the traditional telephone method or whatever it is to reach out to somebody, and it would be a car company or a company has a car, whatever it is, and the car would basically arrive, right? What Uber did essentially, it does not even own a single car. What it did was it essentially created a digital platform which essentially connected the cars to the consumer. There was the consumer and the car, and Uber came right here in the center, which essentially created that particular platform, which connected the car operator and the consumer. And what did it do? Everything that it did, it took the entire process of uh, finding the understanding the need, satisfying the need of the customer to have a car at a particular point in time. So ordering of a car went through the digital platform, through your app. The payment went through the app. The experience was measured through the app. So when what they did is everything that you would have normally been interacting, which would have been a relationship for you with, say, a car company owner or a car driver, they basically transform all of that into what you call as an app. And what did they do? They took a lot of offline elements, offline processes, and made them completely transform into technology. So what they did is they were starting to give you a digital experience of the entire process of ordering, fulfillment, and payment. So what did you need? You only needed a car to go from point A to point B. So they connected you to the nearest car which is available based on the class of car that you selected. Then once you got into the car, they ensured that the experience within the car, that the car was clean and those kind of things, which was on the physical side. Then they ensured that when you got to that particular point and destination, you made that particular payment, and then you gave a feedback mechanism. They completely transformed that into a digital experience. Same thing I can apply to banking. How many of you today go to a physical bank? Or how many of you even know that a physical bank exists, right? So from that aspect, everything that you do with your particular bank is an online interaction, whether through a call center or through essentially what you call as your app or your online channel. That is what you basically do. And you can pretty much do all of your particular transaction completely through the internet or completely on a platform or on an app that uh, the bank basically gives you. Way back, you would not be able to do that. You would need to take a physical checkbook. You would need to go to the bank, deposit the checkbook, and then essentially change that. Today, what happens is all of you deal in a lot more of digital currency, and that's what you do. For future, it is going to also possibly move into a lot more of cryptocurrency, and that is where essentially the entire experience is changing. You're moving from a physical form to a completely online or a digital kind of a form, which essentially requires creation of a digital experience and creation of that digital experience, integrating channels which can be physical interaction, which would be the traditional brick and mortar, through a call center, through the traditional phone lines, or through an online experience through a portal, all of integrating all of that is what I would call as digital transformation.
Okay, sir. Many students are interested to know the problems of technological changes. So many students are asking this question.
I'm sorry, couldn't hear your question.
The pros and cons of rapid changes in the technology are, as we're talking about, there are changes every time in the technology. So students are going to know what are the bad effects of rapid changes in the technology.
Uh, I believe I understand. I could hear only part of the question. I don't know if it's because of my internet or the thing, but if
Shall I repeat, sir?
yeah, if you
Shall
can
I
repeat
repeat?
that, right? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So students are actually asking, so what are the good and bad effects of rapid changes in the technology?
Always good and bad changes, right? Essentially, for example, all of us have gone through significant transformation of technology. But the bad guys also have kept up. And there's so much what you call online. The changes are essentially of obviously in terms of health effect. There are changes related to cyber hacking. There are cyber threats which are there. So when you really look at it in terms of rapid changes of technology, there's only so much that the people also can adapt. So as people are adapting and as people are moving, but the bad guys are also catching up. So there's aspect of cybersecurity, there's an aspect of privacy, there's an aspect of health, all of which are, I would call as some of the negatives in this particular complete area. But over a period of time, I believe we will sort of get to a particular stage where we will sort of address every one of these issues. Cybersecurity is being addressed already. Privacy, essentially, yes, there's a lot more to be done. Health, I think a lot more of the people, I think many people are going to face significant health issues because of posture, because of where they're sitting and how they're accessing the amount of technology that they need to use and the overuse of technology, all of which essentially would be using functionalities of body, which otherwise normally, for example, if you take the entire texting where people do that, the thumbs traditionally were not used to basically be used that much, right? From an overall perspective, they were more for the sun. So a lot of those are causing a lot of health issues in not only in youngsters, but a lot of other people. So all of those are going to be what you call this particular generation's challenge in terms of how they basically adapt.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for handling these questions. I would like to invite now Professor Milin for the concluding remarks. Sir?
Am I audible now?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Okay. On behalf of the NorthCap University, I must thank Shree for a wonderful and engaging lecture. It's not possible to summarize in a space of few minutes all the ideas that he has put forward. Technology is exciting or technology is scary, but you can't be indifferent to it because you are already in it. And the disruptors are of particular importance because they're all there. We never think about it, but they are actually capable of and transforming our lives and already transforming our lives. So the session has been so interesting that we have overshot our time. Okay, that's a testimony to how engaging the talk was. Thank you very much, Sri, and we will get many more opportunities to pick your mind as we collaborate further between university and your firm. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Millen, and thank you to the university. And I think thanks to all the young minds who basically attended today. And thank you all, whether you're taking it from the comfort of your bed or from the university campus. Uh, if you feel more comfortable and if there's no more masterclass sessions, go back to what you were doing. But thanks for attending and have a fantastic day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank you.
so much.
Thank you.
So with that, we can close the session.